A very good morning to you all. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this presentation and discussion session hosted by WWF-Pacific. WWF-Pacific is pleased to acknowledge and welcome His Excellency Ambassador for France, Sujiro Singh. We also would like to welcome the Permanent Secretary for Economy and the Permanent Secretary for Economic Affairs and Fisheries, heads of regional and local organizations. We also extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Pascal Canfin, the Chief Executive Officer of WWF-France. Ladies and gentlemen, I now hand over to our gracious facilitator, Ms. Cynthia.
Friends and colleagues, we're all aware of the recent IPCC special report on limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we've heard that the report basically confirms what many of us have known for a while, that we stand to irreversibly lose much of our marine and coastal resources with increasing global temperatures. We know, or we've heard from the report, that at 1.5 degrees Celsius, about 70% of the world's tropical coral reefs are at risk of bleaching by 2100, while at 2 degrees Celsius, virtually all our coral reefs are at risk of severe degradation from global warming and bleaching. The report does tell us that limiting global temperatures at 1.5 degrees Celsius is something that is still achievable if we are all willing to put some action to our words. We all know what to do. The science is telling us what we need to do, and what we need to be doing is getting onto it. At the same time, adaptation needs to be stepped up to address the more pressing changes that we are already seeing. We recognize that there is much to learn from our previous and current efforts in conservation and adaptation, but that we need to work better. We need ways of working that are integrated and cross-sectoral, and we need to create new funding opportunities. So that is why we're here today. This morning we will hear from WWF and its partners on progress on a 10-year funding proposal on climate adaptation in the Great Sea Reef region. We will discuss the financial mechanisms and funding opportunities behind being pursued, and we will learn some innovative models in research. We'll hear from our colleague from New Caledonia this morning on some research techniques being used that have been applied here in Fiji as well. So, as you can see from the program, there will be, basically this is a series of presentations with the opportunity for questions and answers. So we hope you will have opportunity to participate in the session. So I would like to now get started with the program. And I'd invite Mr. Francis Areki, the Conservation Director for WWF-Pacific Program Office, and Mr. Hubert Giraud, who is the New Caledonia representative for WWF-France, to provide a overview of coral reefs in the Southwest Pacific and what this means in the global context.
I don't think I need to re-emphasize the importance of coral reefs, especially to Pacific Island economies and especially livelihoods for communities, resiliency, especially when dealing with coastal sort of protection, and other benefits that derive directly from the integrity and the intact systems present within coral reef systems. But just to highlight, for coral reefs, these are some of the major sort of points around the importance. 1 in 3 marine species come from the oceans. Like I mentioned, it's important for economies. It contributes about 30 billion net benefits to the global economy based on a study in 2003. And WWF conducted Melanesian Ocean report that actually quantified the value of the oceans, which is about 548 USD billion in terms of its annual economic value, directly and also through associated services. But what we need to highlight, not from a conservation perspective, but also from a socioeconomic view, is 20% of coral reefs globally are already destroyed, 25% are highly threatened, and this is a combination of anthropogenic sources coming off the land and poor coastal development or poor development on the land, combined with the ever-growing concern around climate change and its impacts for communities and Pacific Island countries. So, like Sima had mentioned, the drive to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees is because of the likely loss of coral reef systems. To lose our coral reef systems would mean a very precarious sort of contribution to the loss of income, not only at community level, but at the national level in terms of fisheries. Fiji especially has a $1 billion tourism sector, which is likely to be affected by climate change as well. Tourists don't come to the Pacific to see dead reefs. They actually come to see a live, thriving sort of system that highlights the importance of. So, highlighting again, if we go beyond 2 degrees Celsius, studies have shown that by 2050, if we continue as we currently do, over 90% of coral reef systems will be dead. And this is not something that we want to hand over to future generations, because a lot of us in the room most likely won't be around in 2050, but it is our responsibility to pass on a better system to future generations in the Pacific and globally as well. So, highlighting our work in the Pacific, WWF's Coral Triangle Initiative is basically highlighting that area within Asia Pacific that demarcates the boundaries of the highest biodiversity of coral reefs. And the reason why WWF and its partners and governments have been investing quite heavily in these areas, simply as an area for seeding our oceans. But aside from the Coral Triangle Initiative, which I won't go into detail because there's quite a lot of information already available on the initiative, and I think a lot of you are aware of it already. But to highlight as well the Southwest Pacific priority region for WWF, which also highlights outside the Coral Triangle some important coral reef systems that by the majority also contribute to the diversity of these systems in the South Pacific, which includes the Great Barrier Reef, the reef systems in New Caledonia, and also the Great Sea Reef in Fiji. So, why is the South Pacific priority region a leading role, playing a leading role for coral protection? In combination with these three systems, they're the three longest continued barrier reef systems in the world. Australia and France and their territories have the most coral reefs in the world and have the highest concentration of coral reef diversity based on the structures of these reef systems. And similarly, like I've mentioned previously, our coastal populations, Fiji's population is about 80% of our 900,000 or so people in the country, all located along the coastal areas, heavily dependent on the reef systems to sustain income and also development within the communities. And also to just highlight again the opportunities of the work that France and Australia have been doing through the International Coral Reef Initiative to push forward the agenda for coral reef awareness globally and also some concrete actions to address their decline. So this is just basically an overview of the status of no-take reef marine protected areas in 3 countries. 33% of reef systems of the Great Barrier Reef are under protection. Similarly, the whole of most of the areas in New Caledonia are also protected, and through Fiji's Flaman network, contributes to about 10% of reef systems protected through community management with government. And so there's a diversity of opportunities and expertise that can actually contribute to the cause to try and raise the platform on why we need to invest in coral reef protection, and also to get a more concrete sort of resolutions from governments and especially at international platforms and those areas where we can discuss things to improve management of coral reef systems, especially in the Pacific, which talks about sustainable fisheries and sustainable tourism, looking at innovative tools that can address issues around monitoring, especially data collection, which is a big problem in the Pacific, simply because of the lack of sort of diversion of investment to collect sufficient data to guide decision management and processes. Adaptation sort of opportunities, how do we cope with the change and bring about innovative ideas into that space. Looking at citizen science initiatives and new technologies to empower communities and also engage public in this space as well. And also ensuring that there's a highlight not only from an economic point of view, but also the importance of the systems for preserving culture, especially with Pacific Island communities. And also there's a lot of work dealing with ecosystem-based management and trying to make sure that coral reefs are not addressed in isolation, but is part and parcel of the bigger sort of integrated system. For instance, what's happening in the Pacific at the moment with regards to reef-to-ridge projects and making sure we're addressing some of the bigger threats in combination with climate change, especially Fiji, which is sedimentation. I think sedimentation is one of the biggest threats in comparison to climate change. So just to highlight the importance of why we're doing this, and it's because of our national sort of commitments to international conventions, which include the Convention of Migratory Species, CITES, CBD, and also a lot of the commitments under the COP21 events. And just basically, we're coming to 2020. This is highlighted by Hubei, the biodiversity rendezvous, on seeing what we've actually achieved over the couple of years and whether we're actually making substantive sort of change to improve on coral reef management in the Pacific.
Thank you, Francis. What we'll do is move straight on to the next presentation, which will be on the Great Sea Reef Programme. May I invite the representative for WWF in the Pacific, Mrs. Kesaya Tambunakawai.
Okay, so in September last year, we did a scoping exercise in which we brought 2 consultants from overseas who had done similar work in Africa and were successful in securing funding from GCF. So we brought them here to try and help our thinking and putting ideas together towards a GCF proposal. So this is the outcome of that scoping. So the Great Sea Reef is about 200 kilometers long. It bridges the 2 main islands, and it covers the 4 provinces of Vanuatu, Bua, Ra, and Ba. So there are about, I think, 16 or 18 ingoli, so traditional fishing areas that has Great Sea Reef as the outer boundary. Okay, so in terms of population, we are about 41.5% of Fiji's total population live in those 3 provinces. So in terms of the concept or proposal, we are looking at dealing with the landscape as well as the seascape all at the same time. The idea is, I think, over a 10-year period, if we have enough money and everybody's working together at the same time in an integrated way, we have a better chance of saving the integrity of our reef system. That's the plan, that's the dream. Okay, just quickly, why is the Great Sea Reef important to Fiji? Okay, so in 2004, there was the first ever baseline survey carried out. So 3/4 of all Fiji coral is found in that reef system, but the survey at the time actually only covered the Vanuatu level portion of the reef system. We didn't do the VT level side, so there is every chance that those numbers might actually be more than what we're showing. 16 new species of plants, marine plants, were added to the list. 44% of Fiji's endemic reef species are found in the reef system, and 12 IUCN threatened species are actually found there as well. So in terms of Fiji's economy, 80% of Fiji's offshore fishing is estimated to be connected to that. 80 million per annum in inshore fisheries industry. So just a reminder to us all, it is this little patch of sea space that we actually get most of our fish from. I think most of us can't afford tuna, so we all eat reef fishes. And in terms of our coastal communities, this is a livelihood for subsistence as well as recreation, and their whole lifestyle is based around the coastal area. And in terms of tourism, 70% of Fiji's tourism. As we know, the bulk of our tourism facilities are around the western and northern coast, and a lot of nice sandy beaches in the Azores, and as we know, white sandy beaches associated with reefs and the fishes of the reef system. Okay, in terms of our culture, it's core to the Fijian culture. I think every Itoke here knows that they have a totem, they're connected to a fishing area, so we've grown up with this, and I think we take it for granted until you realize that a lot of people don't actually have that. They have to fight for fishing in areas around their homes. In terms of climate change, okay, so I think we are all familiar with the Pacific Climate Change Science Program. In their report, I think they're saying that our sea level rise is actually, in Fiji, is actually above global average. And in terms of temperature, I think both the measurements taken for Nandi and Suva are also quite high. So we talk about globally these are happening, but also in Fiji it is showing that these things are reflected locally. We all knew that, but I think they're always telling us to provide figures and evidence. Okay, so in terms of threats, in terms of this scoping exercise, the main threats that we didn't come up with. So this whole exercise, we spoke to a whole lot of stakeholders all around Vitile. We brought people in from the level, and then there was a one-day workshop in which actually the members of the workshop came up with the issues and the root causes and all that. So this exercise is actually based on all that work. So the main threat of erosion, siltation, overfishing, habitat loss and degradation. And then I think the next layer down, they sorted that out by forestry, agriculture and all that. So in terms of a costing which will come later, is actually based on that exercise. So in terms of the vision for the program, it should be by 2030, the Great Sea Reef and coastal ecosystems are healthy and resilient to a changing climate, supporting sustainable business, inclusive livelihoods, food security and community well-being. So in terms of the program components, there are 5: forest and mangrove restoration, organic agriculture, sustainable fisheries, renewable energy, and sustainable sea transport. So the calculation, so behind this components is a whole spreadsheet of activities that have been costed, and it comes to, it's $115 million US, not 150, sorry. And it is expected to generate a revenue of 829 million over a 10-year period. So that's a big dream, it's a lot of money to find, and part of the reason why we're here. So I will ask Chiu to talk to us about the organic farming. So those 5 components, we have national stakeholder steering groups, working groups that are working on those, and Chiu is part of the organic farming working group. and I will ask her to come and tell us a bit more about how that working group has been moving on.
I believe that when you talk about organic, you talk about agriculture. And here I'm representing the farm organization in Fiji, as well as the farmers. And we are part of this national stakeholder steering group. What we have realized that it is important that we need to coordinate with each other, irrespective of where we are. We have a very important role to play. And in the agriculture sector, if you talk about organic farming, you talk about the farming practice. And as you can see that the CASA has highlighted that there's a stakeholder steering group. And under this umbrella of the stakeholder steering group, there's 5 working groups that is specifically looking after those 6 components which CASA has already highlighted. And organic farming, we are happy to say that this Fiji Organic Farmers Association is actively participating and lead this working group in driving this organic farming practice as part of this holistic overview on how we can address this climate change's impact. And Fiji Organic Association, I mentioned that spearhead the organic farming in Fiji. It was formed in 2006, and it is one of the 12 farm associations that has been formed by the Fiji Crop Livestock Council, which is a cabinet mandated body under the Ministry of Agriculture. And the Fiji Organic Association is a member of is affiliated member with International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements. It provides guidance on organic farming practice that can help farmers adapt to climate change through strengthening agro-ecosystems, diversifying crop and livestock production, and building farmers' knowledge base to best prevent and confront changes in climate. What is important in organic farming is that not only we're looking into the commercial aspect of commercial farming for returns, and it is important that we need to know that there's rules and standards and regulations not only to comply locally but internationally. And I'm happy to say that this Fiji Organic Farmers Association, in coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Fiji Crop and Livestock Council and the WWF, is very active and also ensure that these farmers, not only farmers but youth and women who are coming into this organic farming practice, are properly trained. So they look into the capacity building as well as ensuring that not only that they comply to the local standards. I believe you all know about POICO, but also ensuring that they comply to the Australian, to the EU organic, and some of our farmers, not only farmers, but also the buyers, the food processors. I'll give a classic example. Kami is a classic example, even Ramadi plantation, because the president of the Fiji Organic Association is Jody Smith. I believe you all know her. She is the managing director of the Ramadi plantation. So you can see this holistic, this coordination. What I want to emphasize is that government agencies, government ministries of all sectors, not only the agriculture sector, they need to own this. So what is the steering group is trying to do is not only to raise awareness with government agencies and the private sector, the civil organization bodies, but at the same time we need to capture what are these ministries doing, what are these agencies doing. So we need to capture what are we doing. We need to coordinate with each other. So we need to have a focal point. If we need to go around and say, what is Fiji doing? We know where to get this information, and data is very, very important. And that is the role that the working group is doing together with the steering group of the GSR Green Climate Fund National Stakeholder Group is doing as to date. And I believe we have a timeline because we have a terms of reference. We have targets to meet. And currently, I believe that is more than 60% of the stakeholder we have already consulted.
As we figured out, part of the work that we're doing now is to get these things rolling. The idea is so when we eventually get the money, the groundwork is already laid there, and implementation rather than socializing after you got the money. So in terms of things that have been moving till now, there is planned training, mermaid. Mermaid is a marine, it's quite a nice acronym. It's Marine Environmental Resources Mapping and Information Database. So it's database training, which is being planned for December 2018 with partners WCS and Ministry of Fisheries, USP, the stakeholders in the marine environment. GSR survey, so into the figures that I mentioned in my presentation, that was taken in 2004. So there is a plan to revisit the 2004 survey sites and see how things are doing in April 2019. So we are currently working with the Ministry of Waterways in terms of getting permits for scientists, as well as trying to get exemption on duty on the equipment that's necessary for the research. So one of the things that's going to be happening is what is termed as Reef biome health study and annual monitoring over 5 or 10 years. That is also going to be happening in April 2019 on the back of the GSR survey. And then the flow project analysis, which you will hear from Hugh Bear later on, that looks at the landscape part of the Great Sea Reef Programme. And water in Fiji's economy analysis, we had a consultant from within the network come here in August. Again, I think many of you we've spoken to during that time. So this ties in very well with the flow project. So basically the whole idea is we have limited water resource. And what I found out from there, we actually don't know how much water we have in terms of the surface water and the underground water that's being tapped by the water bottlers. So knowing that, and I think understanding that every product that is produced is actually got water in it, we don't consider that. So maybe we should be looking at a new way of managing water in terms of looking at those products. I mean, we all know that we are a water-rich country, but in terms of managing it, our rivers are running dry, we get flooded every time it rains a little bit, so we need to be smart about managing our water resources. Reef to Reach watershed management. Happy to say that we signed last week, finally, after many, many years of working on this Reef to Reach program, our contract to implement watershed work in Ba and Labasa watersheds. Okay, so in terms of, in addition to what she was talking about, so the organics group is going to be doing market study for coconuts and ginger. I think they've identified that there is lack of information on these things. And Batiki, Puno Batiki produce is, I think, getting to be quite well known, effort by the communities to produce organic coconut oil and other products. So we're going to produce a case study on that. So in terms of actions globally, so the financing opportunities, which you will hear a little bit more later on. So those things since September last year, those are some of the things that have been happening and moving. It's quite slow. Oh, on top of that, we finally found some money, around 120,000, 130,000 US dollars, which has enabled us now to actually pick up and move a little bit faster. Okay, so this is, I think it's important to have a look at principles upon which this was guided from the very beginning. It has to have a common GSR vision, which we've heard about. It has to be linked to National Green Growth Framework, National Adaptation Plan, and SDGs. It has to be Fijian run and owned. It has to address priority threats. building on existing successes, and we have quite a lot of that. Public, private, and community investment. It has to be preventative, it has to be scalable, it has to be vertically integrated, and it has to be results-based. So this is a long time. I never understood what this is, but I think I figured it. I finally figured it out last night. So a great, well-designed adaptation project that builds resilience and increase income. And if we take this to GCF and they okay it, I think there is we're still not sure at this stage whether we're going to ask for 115 million or whether we're going to ask only a portion of that. So with that, if GCF has put its backing on it, and then we create a framework for adaptation and mitigation finances, which we have a draft of, then you're likely to get a variety of investors interested in putting a bit of their money in. And the more of those that put a bit of their money in, the more likely you're going to interest other investors. That's the plan, and that's the thinking with this. Okay, so I'll hand this back to you. This is the steering group that we talked about. So there's 18 organizations represented. We have 35 members. We don't always all turn up, but we do get quorums. We've been meeting every month since October last year. I think for the last couple of months it's been the only time that we haven't met because of travels and unavailability of most of our members.
As you can see, there was the first consultation process undertaken by the WWF was in September 2017, and this committee was formed under the consensus. And there was an issue that those who participated at that conference were not the decision makers of these key agencies. So it's not that easy, because these people have to go back and consult the permanent secretary or their supervisors for their membership in this group, and we did appreciate that they do consult. With this consultation, they were given the green light to go ahead and be part of this very important stakeholder steering group. As you can see, there was 18 organizations that were involved, from the government, private sector, the civil society, organization, bodies, and there are 35 members. Our first meeting was in October 2017, and this working group, we did realize later that we need to appoint working groups to specifically look into each of these components. We cannot do everything at that big working group, steering group, national steering group level. That's the formation of these 6 working groups to look into each of those 6 components. And also at the same time, we realized that it is important to appoint the champions. And Mr. Thompson, Peter Thompson, is the global champion. Not only that, then we also see that it is important to appoint champions at local, national, and regional levels. And we do that. We prepare their terms of reference, and I believe now they're actively participating in driving increasing awareness on this climate change impact and how we can address it under those respective key components, 6 components. So part of the role of the working groups to go and meet with the relevant or key government agency and stakeholders and come back. It's not only to go to raise awareness, but also at the same time to gather information, to see what are these people doing, what is this ministry doing, because what we do see is that what we have identified is that sometimes there's lack of coordination. This agency is doing something which is the other agencies not aware of. So it's a coordination, cohesive approach that is very, very important, and this working group are actively and are very effective at that level. And they do come and advise the National Steering Committee when we meet on what work they have done, what is the achievements, what is their target, what is the work in progress, because as our guests has highlighted, that we do work according to our timetable, we have a duration of appointment of 2 years. I think we're coming to the end of the presentation. And again, I do emphasize to key agencies, ministry representatives, we cannot do things on our own. We need to work together and coordinate with each other. That is the way forward. Everybody has a role to play in ensuring that we do achieve what has been highlighted, not only that in line with the SDG, but also in line with the local policy, the government policy, to green growth and climate change. There are so many policies out there, and we need to educate ourselves and to be aware of what policies are out there, and also to coordinate with the NGOs or WWF in this respect on how we can achieve the target or the vision that has been put out this morning to achieve this year. So we have a timeline, a very stringent monitoring that we are undertaking, that by June next year, that is the timeline that we need to achieve. And by November this year, we need to complete the concept and the submission of the proposal in June next year. Thank you.
So this is the end of our presentation, but just to say that part of the reason why we are engaging stakeholders a lot more, it's not a WWF program, it's a national program. We initiated it through the consultation initially, and going through this next phase for concept development and proposal development, we are going to be more and more stepping behind the scene and hopefully get more of the stakeholders to take the lead on this. When it comes to actual implementation, there's only a very small portion of that actually the organization is interested in.
First and foremost, I would want to apologize for my bad English, so don't hesitate to stop me, to make me repeat if you don't really well understand what I try to say. So, Flow, Forest Landscape as Opportunities for Water is an adventure started a few years ago, based on the fact that protecting forest, we can't protect forests just for biodiversity. It's not enough to convince people to do something to move the line. So we will see how we started the project, how was the building of the methodology, and you will see how the first success in New Caledonia allows us to spread this adventure at the regional level. In New Caledonia, we have an incredible forest, a part of the Gondwana land, very rich, more than 3,000 species of plants, for example. But this forest, we are about 30% remaining, is threatened by different threats, mining, deers, invasive species, and fire. Fire, like we could see also in Fiji, for example. And we started to focus on the services, the environmental services produced by this forest to Caledonian people. And you know, I don't have to learn you the kind of services, the four principles, and we try to show what represents forest, considering the different services, mainly on provisioning and regulating services. And I offer you a small trip. We change ocean. We are moving from here to Caribbean. And remember, in 2004 there was a very big cyclone, Cyclone Jan. And the cyclone crossed the island with two countries. And the border of the countries, you could see it. There is a line, it's green from the right side and brown from the left side. And when the cyclone across the country. On the Dominican Republic, we had only 18 people dead. From the IT side, we had more than 5,000 people died. And the reason why, most of the deaths was produced by flood and mudslide. And the difference between the two countries, the only difference was that in the right part you have a forest cover of about a third part of the country, and in Haiti less than 2% of the country. It's a way to show what could be the environmental services produced by forest. Let's go back to New Caledonia with the Guapins tribe. About 750 people living in the range, and today this tribe, because it knew how to preserve the forest of its water catchment, feed in water other tribes downstream, other tribes which lost the forest cover of their own watersheds. So it's another story to show what forests could offer as environmental services, but in the good way. So our project started with three main objectives. The first one was that assess forest functioning state could support for the orientation and prioritization of actions, protection and restoration, support to choose an optimal drainage basin for new catchment, and represent a monitoring tool for forest functionality evolution. What was yesterday, what is today, and what will be tomorrow. So, which services to assess in our tool? We decided to use three services offered by forest. First one, ground stabilization against erosion. Second one, forest resilience, environment resilience. It's a way to how the forest could resist to biological invasion, to fire. And the third one is moisture buffer or water buffering. So we have the three services, and we look at which criteria may traduce these three services. For soil stabilization, the first one, we use erosion hazard. For the second one, water buffering, we use landscape dominance. You will see it later. And for forest resilience, we use forest fragmentation. So we started with these three indicators. And the three indicators were used inside an algorithm which allow us to add them together and to produce a final map and a tree decision with three levels of deterioration, of degradation of the services, water provision services linked with forest. Highly deteriorated, deteriorated, slightly deteriorated. And the final map for New Caledonia was this one. And what are you looking at on this map? 90% of the surface of the water catchment in New Caledonia are degraded. Highly or only deteriorated, but 90%. So, based on this result, really appreciated by the New Caledonia government, we obtained the support of the SPC through the intake program to promote, to share our result, our story in the region. So we went to Vanuatu, we went to Wallis Futuna, and we sent the data and the report to our colleagues of Fiji. And based on the first reaction, we started to spread not only the information, but spread the tool at the benefit of our neighbor. Thanks to World Bank, we succeeded in extending the project to Vanuatu and to Futuna, and an extension to in New Caledonia. And with thanks to the support of the French Pacific Fund, we could offer to Fiji a first test on 2 critical watersheds, Ba and Labasa watershed, with the help of Kesaya and her team, who decided to orientate in the Great Sea Reef area. So we could go 2 places, and our colleagues, Bluecham Satellite Imagery Society, get in August very good satellite images from Copernic, from a European satellite agency, and as you can see, very good quality, and they can discriminate the different land use of the 2 watersheds. And thanks to WCS, I want to thank today because of your help. You were able to get the water protection perimeters of the 2 watersheds as polygon shapefile, the different yellow line. And we had also the opportunity to read and discover this very good report produced in 2005 with WCS again, and showing the level at risk in 2005 on the different watersheds in Fiji. So we applied the same mechanism, the same tool on the Fijian watershed, and with different landscape dominance, the level of vegetation on it, to obtain at the end the 2 red spots. So you could say, well, yes, we knew that it was in a bad situation in 2005, but 2005 was based on data of 1994. And it stayed bad today. Yes, but for our tool, it was, there were different things. The first thing that the erosion hazard levels are far greater than those observed in New Caledonia or in tropical countries. Here in Fiji, it's extreme for all watersheds. So these major criteria we use in New Caledonia, which doesn't discriminate watersheds in terms of priority of action for Fiji. So our team, and with Bluecham, are launching a review to revise the hazard classes. And in the final report, you will have the test of discrimination to have a better picture of what could be priority. But another result that we didn't expect at the beginning of the story was that we seized the opportunity to monitor all the forest cover of your country. And we compared with 1994 the data used for the first report. And what was shown that all the watershed except Labasa has lost forest cover. Some of the figures, even for Labasa, 1% could be the, we can't say it's a decrease because there is the methodology and the possibility of mistake. But for most of the watershed, you could see the figures which show that you are still losing your forest cover. So, to achieve this presentation, I would say that the situation in Fiji, therefore close to that of New Caledonia, with the observation that we are both, you and us, losing the natural capital that brings our quality of life and our development potential. But we can choose to reinvest on this capital, to stop losing it, but even more, to regain it. Together, let's reverse the curve. Thank you very much.
I just want to point out in Labasa that historically much of that watershed has already been cleared. So if you're seeing no net forest loss, and actually gain, it's likely because some forest where it's historically been cleared is coming back. So in that case, it still may warrant some restoration activities and not necessarily protection.
It's in link with the discussion we had yesterday with the Pacific team. Our work stopped here. We are Caledonian people from WWF-France. We want to share tools and to show what this kind of tool could produce for our colleagues, for our neighbors. But now it's your work to, and you will receive the report, everyone, the final report, to say what does it mean. And when you, if you remember the matrix, to look at what was the first objective for every watershed, because you decided a few years ago if it was reforestation, it was protection, and what was the evolution, final evolution. And so it's a way to have the first feedback on the politics, on the dynamic launched after the first report in 2005. So I totally agree with you. There is a big issue now, and it's your work.
Thank you. That was really interesting, and it confirms a lot of the data that we've been collecting in terms of the link between forest and ecosystem services loss. And in a lot of the communities that we're talking to in Fiji, they're becoming more aware of the link between forest and water in particular. Well, I'm Nunia from Nature Fiji, the local conservation organization, and I'm particularly interested in the methodology around measuring forest resilience to fire and invasive species. Is there a way that we can read up more on the methodology around that?
I won't go deep in the details, but most of the critical aspect is that when you have a fragmented forest, fire could enter into your forest and could reduce in terms of percentage a lot more than if you have a whole forest in one piece. So fragmentation offers the possibility of the disturbance to lose, to destroy quantity of hectares more important than if you have a whole forest. And so it's a landscape permeability for fire. You see what I mean? The fire could enter into your forest and hit the border of every fragment of your forest. And it's we observe. I spent more than 10 years to observe in New Caledonia how fire hit the forest, and look at the way the ridge, where there is a wind, where there is also some taboo with community, and the influence on the landscape to decide where stay forest, where it's disappearing. So we could, I will send you all the WWF report, but you totally agree with the importance of the resilience, and there is a strong link between invasive species and fire. People are very, sorry for my English, I'm looking for my words. There are many problems with invasive species as weeds, and so they use more and more fire to solve the problem, and so it's a vicious circle.
My question is specifically related to New Caledonia, because I didn't see there any implications related to between the watersheds, the ones that are disturbed and highly degraded, with nickel mining. And there's nothing, well, we know actually where most of the degraded watersheds that we've seen are actually on the corridor of the core of the nickel mines in New Caledonia. And also the fact that the Great Barrier Reef of New Caledonia is actually including, the buffer zone includes all the key watersheds around it. But in fact, the Great Barrier Reef does not include, World Heritage Site does not include all the areas where nickel mining actually is in watersheds that should be buffer zones. So I just wanted to hear you tell me that it actually has no impact on coral reefs or the degradation of the
mining.
waterfront. Yeah.
Mining is all the analysis is based on the forest cover, and we looked at not only fire destruction but also mining location, and the result is not just a policy to stop fire. It's a policy to tell to policymakers, look at the red color on this watershed. What's the reason why it's red? And we overlap different layers, and the mining layer too, and we see if there is only fire, if there is fire and mining, if there is now with the invasive species dynamic in New Caledonia problems of deers and pigs, which participate in the erosion of the watershed. And so mining is totally included in this work, and I will just show you. Before coming to visit you, dear colleagues, I took it was a Friday, and I took the newspaper to have something to read in the plane, and the first article was consumption of water, warming figures, and there is 2 pages about the water and the problem of water, and there is more than 700 activities decided by the New Caledonia government to start to solve the problem of water or watershed degradation, and there is no something, I don't know the expression, nothing is hidden, because the situation is critical, and there are some discussion about the way to get back some concession, mining concession, because the water issues are evaluated higher than mining issues on this part of the country. So you know the big project, mining project. It's a part of the problem to solve. It's not the solution is not totally found, but today there is a change in terms of political speech. 2 years ago, I never think that I could see the figures, a country like New Caledonia recognizing that there is 600 kilometers of river totally full of stones, that they give the figures of the population without treated water, and put all the figures to the civil society opinion. So there is a change because the issue now, you can't wait for the 2022 century. It's now you have to solve it. And I'm really convinced that in Fiji, with a different discussion I learned, that we could be in the same move and collaborate and develop collaboration to build a solution adapted to the local situation. But we need to work together because the issue for Pacific island countries and territories is the same in the context of climate change. We can't look at, remember the figures for Haiti, could be the same. Or you face a windstorm here, Vanuatu face PAM. We are quite lucky in New Caledonia, but what will happen next year? So we are in the same boat.
If I may introduce Ms. Kichi Vuki-Komoala, who is the Executive Director of the Fiji Environmental Law Association, known as FELA here in Fiji. She will discuss the Vatu Ira Trust Fund model. If I could invite Kichi, thank you.
The Fiji Environmental Law Association has provided legal advisory services and support to WCS and to this project through the funding provided under the Rescue project. And that's our relevance in this project. Okay, firstly, the project is an initiative that has been spearheaded by the Wildlife Conservation Society and who have worked in close collaboration with a number of stakeholders and partners. And I think I need to just acknowledge that right from the outset. They work very closely with the district and Vanua of Nakorotumbu, the Nangilomilo clan, and Matangali Nabuani. The tourism sector, in particular, Nai'a Cruises Fiji, apologies for the pronunciation, the Volivoli Beach Resort, Wananabu Beach Resort, as well as the Ra Provincial Office and a various number of NGO partners, Nature Fiji, Marangeti, BirdLife International, a number of consultants. So about the Vatu Ira, before we get to the trust, we need to know a little bit more about the Vatu Ira park, the park. It is a conservation area that encompasses an island, Vatu Island, or commonly known as the Vatu Ira Island, and the surrounding customary fishing grounds, the Ingolingoli, Vakovata, Nakorotumbu, and adjacent deeper waters. The conservation park covers an area of 110.5 square kilometers and is considered to be the largest marine conservation park under some form of management to date. The area supports a rich diversity of marine life, including dolphins, whales, and turtles. And the main habitats within the conservation park are the fringing coral reefs, lagoons, reef beds, pinnacles, and shallow and deep terraces. A survey of the reef area that was conducted by WCS in 2013 documented at least 121 species of fish, 47 genera of coral, including healthy coral communities, suggesting that old tambu areas or customary conserved areas have been effective in maintaining healthy coral communities. Now, within the conservation park is an uninhabited island with an area of 2.3 hectares and is located in the Vatu Ira channel between Vanuatu and Viti Levu and 15 kilometers off the coast of Ra. It is also known as the Bird Island and because of the large breeding colonies of seabirds on the island. It is listed as a site of national significance in Fiji's National Biodiversity Strategies Action Plan, and is one of the 28 internationally important bird areas recognized by BirdLife International in Fiji. Now the park boasts some of the most spectacular diving in Fiji, drawing divers from all over the world, and at least 4 tourism operators, including the Wali Beach Resort and Vanuatu Beach Resort, frequent the park. Some of the terrestrial threats of the park include the invasion of predatory mammals, cats and mongoose from the mainland, reinvasion of rats, ants, the killing of seabirds, fire, litter, human intrusion and disturbances. And marine threats include poaching and natural and climate change threats. So earlier this year, WCS, together with its government partners, the Ministry of Itaki Affairs, Ministry of Fisheries, Environment, the Ra provincial officers, and representatives of the tourism operators and the landowners, launched the Watu Conservation Management Plan. WCS has kindly provided a number of the copies of the plan here, and I'll provide it to give it to WWF to distribute as they please. Now, this plan establishes the objectives, the zoning, and the management strategies for the Vatira Island and the Ngolingoli Vakovatu Nakurutumu, and of course the associated terrestrial and marine resources. It prohibits any form of destructive and extractive activities that will pose a serious threat to the park, and it sits under the larger umbrella of the Ra Province Integrated Coastal Management ICM Plan that is overseen by the Ra Integrated Coastal Management Committee, chaired by the province. Now, the plan aims to support long-term sustainable development by promoting the health and productivity of the district's ecosystems. And to enable this, the local communities formed a partnership with the local tourism operators to establish a voluntary contribution to conservation scheme to support the long-term management of the park and to generate income for local communities. The voluntary aspect is necessary as the interim government had passed a decree known as the surfing decree that does not allow local communities to charge any fees for the use of surfing areas, which includes these areas. So it was important that any contribution was done, if it was to be done, was on a voluntary basis. And that is emphasized in deed. Now, all income that is generated from the tourism operators or from other means is managed by a board of trustees responsible for implementing the trust deed agreement that was developed and agreed upon by the relevant parties. And as we contributed to the drafting, I have a copy of the deed here, but with me. So the mission of the trust is to promote a holistic ecosystem-based management approach to manage terrestrial and marine ecosystems, and reflects the aspirations of both the communities and private sector needs and aspirations for sustainably managing the island and the surrounding customary fishing grounds and adjacent river waters. It establishes the appointment, duty, and removal of trustees. There are 3 trustees. Each trustee represents one trustee representative of the NGO community, one trustee representative of the owners, of traditional owners, and one trustee representative of the tourism sector. The deed establishes the membership, powers, roles, and responsibility of a management committee for the park. And it also establishes a secretariat and a coordinator. The members of the trust include representatives of the 28 villages within the Nakoro-Tumu community, and the fund, and through the fund is able to generate funding through one, the voluntary contribution to conservation schemes. So local diving operators will determine how much they would like to give towards the fund, a percentage of the diving fees whenever they visit or take divers out to the area. And the trust is able to also generate funding through other sources. So it can apply for funding, it is legitimized through the deed process, and it is able to apply for a tax identification number, although it is considered an informal incorporation because it's not established like as a company, it's not a charitable trust. It's an informal incorporated body whose objectives and its activities are legalized through the trust agreement. All monies that are generated through the voluntary contribution system. So I mentioned that there are different sources of funding. One aspect of that is the voluntary contributions that are provided by the diving operators. That money can only be used for a certain purpose, and that is contained within the trust deed agreement. All money received through voluntary contribution system is to be used for education grants for students within the Yakusa Nanyunulo, that's 40%. Education grants for students from the Ngolingoli, Vakawatu, Nakoro-Tumu, that's 30%. And then 30% of the fees to be used for the management of the Vanuatu Conservation Park. I'm happy to say that the first set of grants have already been determined and have been issued to the community, funding that was provided through the rescue that was through WCS to test the function of the the operations. And so that was actually done very successfully, and a number of students were provided with tertiary small allowance. I think we're looking forward to the next round of funding.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Based on the first success you met, do you plan to spread the model of Vanuatu in other critical coastal places in Fiji?
I believe that is the intention of the model that has been used. I believe, and Stacey is there in case Stacey Jupiter is there, but I believe that the model is something that WCS has been talking about, raising awareness about. It's also under the rescue, it's an initiative funded under the rescue project. So it provides a model for others who may find it useful for their purposes, who may find it relevant to adopt. I don't think there's any real secrecy behind the establishment of that model, but it is something that has been used by other communities for other purposes. But this is, I am told, the first one. When we went to the registry, the register of companies, they advised us that this is the first trust they've seen that is relevant to conservation, marine conservation.
Just to add on that, because I think it's a question that's very relevant to the discussion of the Great Sea Reef. This is a model that works very well where there is a private sector market that's willing to buy in. And so it's appropriate in areas across the Great Sea Reef like the Asawas where there's high level of tourist engagement. It's not necessarily appropriate everywhere. Then the question is, are people willing to come into a larger scale cooperative where tourists are only coming to a certain area where people have land ownership and some marine rights, and also share those benefits elsewhere? That's a broader conversation that would need to be had with all of the different landowning and fishing rights owners before a larger trust could be established for Great Sea Reef.
I think sustainable financing for protected areas is something that everybody in the community struggles with, and it is key to find a multitude of answers to, so thank you. I was curious to understand the breakdown between the revenue generated from voluntary contributions and then the funding revenue that needs to be generated by the committee or additional partners. And also if there's stability of revenue sources across years, or if you see dips in the market. And just thinking about climate risks, particularly that Ra was struck by Cyclone Winston a couple of years ago, how we can climate proof some of those investments in terms of the revenue generated from voluntary contributions. Naka.
Okay, I think I can answer the first part of it, and the second part I'll hand that over to Stacey. In terms of the distinction between funding, you see the trust fund, it manages it provides the trust with an ability to generate funding not only through the voluntary conservation scheme, but because it's established and it has a trust deed. In Fiji, the law recognizes that it recognizes that it has been established formally through a trust and will give it its own tax identification number. It can apply for a bank account, a trust account, and therefore it enables it to be able to attract funding from other sources. So the Vanuatu Conservation Park Trust, the trustees can invest the funding to generate more income. They can also apply for funding from donors. It's up to the donor whether they will provide money to the trust, but because we have a trust in place with all the relevant governance principles embedded in the trust agreement, it puts it in a better state in terms of receiving funding. So there are various other things that the directors can do. They can invest, they can purchase assets, they can sell assets, so forth. But the voluntary aspect of it, that money comes from the tourism operators who specifically asked in the negotiation process that money be used for a specific purpose, and that was for the education of to be used as education grants that would benefit the communities, the traditional owners of the park.
A great background by how you can build some resilience into this, not that it's necessarily yet built into the system, but by having it set up as a trust with its own bank account, you have the ability to manage assets, receive other donations, or apply for other funding. And so that could be used as a buffer to counter times when, for example, after Cyclone Winston, some of these resorts stopped operating for a period of time because they were heavily damaged. And so that was before this trust was set up, but there would have been a dip in terms of tourists accessing the conservation area.
I really like the setup of setting up of a trust fund, around the conservation park. And the trust fund in itself, that provides the legal framework in terms of managing the resources, yeah? And then we've talked about the educational fund. But I was curious to understand, apart from the tourist operators, you've got the private sector, and then you've got NGOs. How is it that communities, or women in particular, are participating in the decision-making where money goes? I think this is, increasingly, this is, from what I heard you say, it's the first of its kind and the largest here in the country. Would that be right? Yes. So it's around its governance. So the governance is not just left to the trust, to the the individual sitting in the trust, but the whole the practice and the process of accounting and ensuring that there's good governance, and that those who don't normally are sitting at the table are then not just talking about women as women representatives, but those like women in fisheries, and I know that WCS plays a really large role in that area. So maybe, I know WCS would be good if Sangeeta was here to answer for to provide some insight, Kichi, but maybe Stacey, you would be able to give us the sense.
The trust does not distinguish between gender. The beneficiaries of the trust are all the registered members of the Nganilo clan, and the trust is meant to benefit all members of the all relevant beneficiaries where applicable. In terms of the decision-making process, now we have the trust establishes a membership, and the membership, they are representatives of the 28 villages. Who becomes a representative of that particular, to the trust, is not defined by the trust. It only establishes that there will be a representative from each of the villages. Yeah, that is a process that will be determined by the community. They decide who will become a member. Their role in terms of the decision making is limited really to the processes that will apply during an AGM. So the approving reports and so forth. But the trust itself, like as you had mentioned, the trust and how it will operate is all contained within the deed. It is quite detailed in terms of how the funding is going to be used, what the purposes of the funding will be used for, and I think what is important to note in this process is that all the trustees are liable personally if they make decisions that fall outside of what is agreed to. Now, in the development of the trust, it wasn't a document that was just prepared by us, and there was a consultative process involving all communities, and it took quite a significant amount of time to get even to this process, where both women and men were, of course there's no gender-specific requirement, but representatives from both women and men were there in the consultation process. So it took quite a number of years to reach this process, and a number of consultations, not only called in the province, but it was taken out to the communities, where they were explained what the deed was, what the purpose was, until it came to the point where they agreed that this was the way that they wanted to go forward. Now, initially, before we even developed the deed of trust, all communities were called together and given a number of options, a number of legal, I would say formal and informal options for them to decide which of these options they would like to choose. It was given to them. And so it was the community and the stakeholders, the tourism partners as well, that determined that this was the way forward, that they wanted to go to have a deed of trust. So in terms of, if you were to look at women and children specifically, I don't have the stats for that in terms of I think WCS would have a record of consultations, but in fact, I was present at a number of these consultations, and I do recall that WCS worked with the provincial office and worked to provide as much notice as possible to the communities to attend these consultations.
Important to note that there's sort of two levels of governance here that are quite important. There's one for the trust deed itself, and there's a board of trustees that are responsible for the management of those funds in terms of the managed assets. But then the other level of governance is responsible for the benefit sharing of those funds that goes out. And this is a situation that's not unique to this project, it's unique to projects that most of us in this room have set up around Fiji. And so in order to improve the governance and make sure the equity of that benefit sharing, that involves work within the context of traditional governance structures, other participatory structures, to make sure that women's voices are heard in the way that's culturally appropriate. And so, in this case, the money's largely going towards education funds, so making sure that the people selected to receive those funds is a transparent process and is not necessarily just the children of the chief, right, who's getting the money. So those work in that space to look at the transparency of that decision-making process.
What is your involvement? Is there an external involvement in the actual running of the trust in the management team? Is there someone from outside, or is it just the villagers sitting in the trust management? How involved are you in terms of the daily running or management of this trust?
There is established within the trust the management committee, and the management committee is chaired by currently chaired by the ROCO of the provincial office, I believe. And it comprises of a number of representatives from various sectors. So it's a management management committee that actually is responsible for, what do you say, the day-to-day operations and functions of the management of the park as a whole. And then they have also a the trust allows them to invite anyone from outside who may be able to provide some expertise or so forth. But the composition of the committee is in the management plan, which you could have a look at. There's also a secretariat and a coordinator, which is actually the only person who may receive some paid employment to do the running around the ground. But yes, so the management committee will basically run the day-to-day operations, and they will then have their work plan and their budget, and they'll provide that to the trustees, and it's the trustees' role to just endorse it and see whether it's relevant within the trust document. They endorse it or they approve it or not.
So I'd just like to introduce our next speaker, Paul Chatterton, who is the lead and founder of the Landscape Finance Lab, a global platform for incubating sustainable land and seascape programs that deliver impact on sustainable development goals and climate goals. Paul is a former conservation director of WWF's West Melanesia program, during which time he was based in Papua New Guinea. Paul and the Finance Lab were instrumental in the GSR-GCF scoping study, which provided the basis for the GSR concept proposal. So I'm going to hand over to Paul. Hopefully this session will continue without any technological glitches. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks a lot, Seema. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be part of this, and please forgive me if I stumble over my words. It's a bit over past 1 o'clock in the morning here in Vienna, where I'm based. I'm really excited to be part of the Great Sea Reef Program idea development. It's really setting the scene on a whole range of aspects globally. It's one of the first major programs to develop financing initiatives for coral reefs. Can you still see me okay?
Yeah.
Lovely. Now I can see everyone else. Hello.
Better like that.
It's one of the first major initiatives for adaptation worldwide that brings together both sea and land. It's using. We're trying to bring together a number of different financing initiatives as well, financing lines. So that's where it's breaking ground, and it's small island development state. It's really pushing the boundaries for small island development states as well. So with no further ado, let me just dig into some of the elements of the Great Sea Reef Program. You've probably seen some of this before, and give you a sense of where we're going with financing those, some of the ideas that are developing. Let me try to share my screen first. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, lovely. So when we first started looking at the Great Sea Reef Program, the focus was very much on reefs themselves. How do you maintain these reefs over the next 20, 30, 50 years? They're absolutely fundamental to the economy of Fiji. As we looked at it further, it became clear that half of the economy of Fiji depends on the inshore reefs. The tourism industry requires them. That's why tourists fly to Fiji. One of the main reasons. and obviously the fishing industry as well. So we look very carefully at the potential for sustainability in the reefs. There's already a very strong foundation. The work being done with the with communities across all of the islands of Fiji, and the LMMA, the locally managed marine areas program, was excellent. That involved, I think, 700 villages. It had set up over hundreds of marine protected areas. The fish were coming back in many areas. It was very good cases for sustainability. Looking at the details of what could be done, there's need for better enforcement in the reefs. The offshore fishing was an issue and needed to be managed, and a chance to really with fairly minimal costs bring back significant returns. So we looked at a cost of about $6 million for a program that should be able to bring returns in the order of $60 million. But as we dug into it deeper, it became clear that was only possible if you look at what's happening on the land. The reefs are being threatened by climate change, as with the Great Barrier Reef. They're bleaching because of increased temperatures, and they'll be affected by sea level rise as well. But more importantly, just like the Great Barrier Reef, it's the land-based runoff that's affecting the reef system. And there's three things that need to be done, we found, to address this. One is to restore the mangroves, because this is where the fish breed, and the mangroves themselves protect the inshore areas. So restoring mangroves is fundamental. But also restoring the river forest. The siltation that comes down the rivers is having a major impact on the reefs. Now the good news with both of those is that there is a major carbon program, forest carbon program that's been developed in Fiji that can pay for forest restoration, and is doing so in a couple of locations. So how can that be extended? It seems fairly plausible, and we looked at this very carefully, to restore the 10,000 hectares of mangroves that once covered Fiji's coast. There's evidence of restoration in over hundreds of hectares already, and so just building on that progress and the work done by I've got the name of it, the Japanese organisation with local communities, we can restore the mangrove forests. The river forests are going to be a little bit more difficult, but there's significant benefits possible, and the international community certainly has the ability to cover the sort of costs that we're estimating there of $49 million cost with returns, carbon returns possible of $45 million. Now, they may sound absurd numbers, and they will be difficult to return in Fiji, but they're put together by a couple of German consultants that we worked with, who have worked with us in the Congo to develop what's probably the largest carbon project currently in existence in the world. It's a project in the Democratic Republic of Congo where the World Bank has allocated $170 million in financing for restoring forests and protecting an area of forest the size of Greece. So there's a lot of detailed work that's gone into that. It's similar calculations that have been used to develop these estimates for Fiji. The tough side of it will be the land-based forest restoration. We're seeing some evidence that that's possible, but the work that FAO has done has shown that that's not a simple process. So that's something that needs further work. The other stressor on the reefs is the runoff, is the pesticides and organic fertilizers that come from agriculture. They run down the reefs, run down the rivers, and they get onto the reefs and they're poison to the reefs themselves. So how can we take that out? That seemed a task when we first started looking at it, but as we dug into it, we realised it was actually already a major trend in Fijian agriculture towards agricultural organic production. We conducted the Fiji Organic Producers Association to look at the economics of transition from traditional agriculture to organic agriculture. In many cases, this is fairly easy because systems farming doesn't tend to use any inputs, much agriculture, much fertilizer or pesticides. But where sugar is particularly difficult, there's a number of other farming operations that are using organics, and there's a real drive from the tourism industry to have organics on the table. The tourists were flying to Fiji wanting to have their organic mangoes, their organic fruit and vegetables for breakfast, and that is currently being flown in from Australia, paradoxically. So can it be produced in Fiji, and is the potential for exporting some of that product. We'll actually be flying Jody Smith from the Earth Care Agency to a major investor conference in Dublin next month to present a number of different investable projects in the organic agriculture area. So there's already a good foundation there, and evidence that this can grow rapidly. And what's really surprising is the sort of returns that are possible. Whether we can get that full level of returns, the $700 million for a $35 million cost is yet to be seen. But it's fairly clear that there's significant returns possible, and evidence of those already happening. So when you add all of that up, let me touch on low carbon transport and renewable energy. These are two byproducts of this program as well. The potential is to support electric transport, dinghies based on electric motors, and renewable energy solar panels in villages for light and electricity. When you put all of those things together, you're looking at a program that will cost somewhere around $115 million and should generate somewhere between that in returns, and highest estimate is $800 million. This is very much linked to the National Adaptation Plan as well. If you look at the National Adaptation Plan, you'll see that these categories are very much are the core focus of adaptation work that's needed to be done. It's linked up to the National Climate Strategy and economic plan. And I think what we learned as we went along and brought together 15 different organisations who generated this plan is that if you look at any one of these individually, you can get certain returns, you've got certain costs, but it's by bringing different each of these together, you create synergies, you create opportunities for benefit from one sector to another. You get people talking, fisher people talking to farmers, farmers talking to foresters, and there's the potential to really reduce some complexity and add benefit to all of the sectors. Okay, that's the overall picture that was generated last year, and which was presented at the Climate Convention in Bonn in November last year. So where that money might come from is the work that we're currently doing. Move this across. So there's a number of ways to pay for that, but traditionally, WWF and organizations would be looking at grants. Well, we'd be raising money from our members. We'd offer that through our local office to support local organisations doing work, and we'll continue doing that. There's no question about that. But there's another scale of grant and subsidy that's possible these days with funds like the Global Environment Facility and the Green Climate Fund. Fiji is already a recipient of GEF money. But the Green Climate Fund is a new initiative that did have $12 billion to spend until Trump took a few billion away. But it's still got significant potential to finance activities in the Pacific, and we'll be putting together a concept note with the GSR steering committee for the fundamental aspects of this program. What's interesting though is whether we can bring some of these other lines of finance into the Fiji program that are not traditional work for WWF. Loans is something that we have worked on in a small sense in different parts of the world. But we want to be much more sort of systematic about providing opportunities for businesses that are supporting sustainable fisheries or forest management or organic agriculture to access finance. And the Fiji Development Bank, key partner there, ANZ and other national banks will be key players in sourcing loan ideas. And then there's a number of investors worldwide, impact investors particularly, who are looking to invest in projects that generate real returns for the environment as well as for their investment. I'll give you the key example of that, a fund set up by a French bank in Maraba, and now purchased by another French bank, Marova, linked to the STCD and Degradation Neutrality Fund. The Land Degradation Neutrality Fund, I think Pascal will be talking about, and is a really interesting new initiative that finances provides both grant and loan finance. And I'll leave Pascal to explain further, but I think that could be a source of finance for the GSR program. Payment for performance is another form of finance that is starting to appear in the world. This includes the REDD finance, the RED finance, the finance for forest and climate, like that Congo program I mentioned. Forest Carbon Partnership has supported the Fijian government to set up a carbon payment program for forest in Fiji. So we'll be looking at that to support forest and mangrove regeneration. And we're a number of corporate players who are investing in this space as well. Ecosia is a German internet company that is competing with Google as a search engine, and its main offering is that if you click on Ecosia, 80% of the profits go to planting trees. We've been talking to them about investing in the Fiji program, helping to trigger some of the initial experiments in mangrove and river forest restoration. Another area that we'll be looking at is bonds. Fiji already has one of the first sovereign green bonds in the world. France, I think, was first, and Pascal actually was one of the architects of that program. The IFC, the International Finance Commission of the World Bank, helped the Fijian government to develop I think, $100 million Fiji bond that was launched last year at the Climate Convention in Bonn. There'll be another green bond coming down the line in the next few years, so that provides a good opportunity, I understand, for the government to invest in some of the activities of the Great Sea Reef program. And then a final area of investment, if you call insurance investment, perhaps it's not investment, but it's something that can guarantee the quality of other investments, work in the insurance world, and we're just starting to put together a program globally with the world's largest insurance broker, Willis Towers Watson, to look at something called resilience insurance. It's a really exciting idea, and it'll be quite complex. Whether we'll be able to deliver this in Fiji is a big question. But if we can, I think it'll be dramatically useful for Fiji. And if it works in Fiji, then it can work in the rest of the world. The idea is very similar to health insurance. So when you take out health insurance as a person, if you're a smoker, you pay more, because obviously you're going to cost the insurance company more in premiums. If you're not a smoker, you pay less, and in some cases, insurance companies these days can pay for your gym membership so that you remain healthy and therefore have lower claims. Now, the idea with resilience insurance is to treat the environment the same way as a person. If a country or a city or a company has a strategy for dealing with climate impacts and sustainability impacts, and an adaptation strategy, a resilience strategy, and they're actually implementing that, then there are lower risks to the insurance company than a company or a city or a country that doesn't have a strategy. Fiji does have a good strategy, and if the GSR program is running, then there's clear evidence of implementing that. So a chance for Fijian operators, Fijian stakeholders to get lower insurance rates than other countries. And then the interesting trick is that if there's no claim, if there's no cyclone or tsunami or other major catastrophe that requires payout, then the insurance company will pay directly for some of the actions that improve the resilience of the system, that strengthen the ability of the Fijian environment to deal with shock, maybe by paying for mangroves to be replanted in front of hotels, by restoring forests and so forth. So this is another opportunity to invest in the GSR program, but to do so from a very different angle and to test out an idea that I think will really be beneficial across the whole world. Early days, that's very early days at the moment, the discussion on that, and we're just starting to put that together. Just to wrap up, none of this is yet in place, so this is the plan for this year, is to prepare each of these different types of activities, a Green Climate Fund proposal, loan applications, and take them out to investors, the performance payments for the forest restoration, start talking with the IFC about and the government about the next elements of the next green bond and the insurance world. Just to give you a sense of where that's going in terms of the theory, this is how conservation organisations tend to work across the world. If you've got a landscape program or a seascape, it'll be in by an organisation like WWF to support conservation activities, sustainability activities. There'll be other conservation organisations and philanthropic organisations putting in grants. The government will support conservation activities, whether protected areas or sustainable forest management or fisheries and so forth. And there may be some private sector activity. And these figures come from a global scan of investment across the world. So roughly about 15% of activities in any landscape across the world support sustainability. But given that all of the world's governments have committed to the SDGs, which means that all activities in a land or seascape should be conservation, supporting conservation and sustainable development, a long way from where we need to be. here's what we want to create with the Great Sea Reef Programme, and if we can do it in the Great Sea Reef Programme, then it's possible to do it in other parts of the world. We want to maintain that similar set of activities that we have on the left. You'll see still these activities up the top, but it's particularly the loan investment where we think we're going to be able to increase sustainability of actions across the landscape. Performance payments, the carbon, bonds will help support loan and public sector finance activities, and then the insurance will provide incentives for the whole system to work. So our aim is to cover a much larger area of the landscape with truly sustainable investment opportunities, and get up to a much bigger coverage of the area. Okay, let me stop there. Here's a picture of where you are, which is very, very blue when you look at it from outer space. Fiji is somewhere in there, I'm not sure exactly where. Just a little tiny speck in the ocean, but this initiative is being watched by the leadership of WWF as an example of what can be done with all coral reefs across the planet at the moment. It's really capturing the attention of our global teams, and it's already a long way ahead of what most other coral reef teams are doing. And we hope to be able to move that forward really dramatically in the next year. And if we can do it in Fiji, we need to cover probably about 10 to 20 other coral reef areas on the planet to be able to have a really significant shift in how coral reefs are managed. If we can do it in Fiji forests, then we need to do it in maybe 20, 30 other landscapes around the world to secure the world's forest biodiversity. If we can do it, if we can shift agriculture in Fiji, then we can do it in the Brazilian in the plains of Brazil, in South Africa, in some of the other significant agricultural production areas where there's also major biodiversity. So what the experiment that's going on in Fiji will be watched by a lot of people around the world. Not to put any pressure on you, but I think that you guys are really leading some important thinking that's going to be helping the planet.
As WWF-France, to be part of this workshop, well, beyond the workshop, to be part of the design of new tools in order to finance sustainable development. So I will start with a first presentation of what Paul already mentioned, or teased, I would say, which is the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund, LDNF. So you are obviously aware of the fact that land degradation neutrality is an SDG, it's number 15.3. So the global community set this objective: no more land degradation by 2030. Every day we still continue to degrade 12 million productive hectares of land. So it means that we are destroying this natural capital. And the whole purpose of this fund, which is a private and public one, is precisely to finance the restoration of natural capital in order to generate revenues and then to pay back the initial capital. So I don't have that many slides, actually I have only one, which is, should be, so, no, even this one is not working. So just the story before entering into, yeah, that's the structure of the fund. Why I focus on that? Precisely because it's the most bothering part, of course, but it might be also the most interesting part because we need to address the challenges and the expectations of the finance community. Otherwise, we can't match the expectations of the conservation community and the expectations of the finance community. So that kind of thing is designed precisely to create this common ground, to scale up massively the financing of land restoration. So the basic story is that in many countries, at small scale or medium scale, it has already been demonstrated that if you finance the restoration of natural capital, then, and you have organic agriculture activity, or fair trade activity, or agroforestry activity, or sustainable fishery activity, which is land precisely, but that's the same kind of rationale, then you can generate additional economic revenue, and then you can pay back. So it's already demonstrated at small scale. The whole thing is how to scale that up. Not to reinvent the wheel, because it has already been invented, but to scale it up. So this fund has been formally closed. So when you say closed in finance, it's launched, actually. So it's formally in operation since September, so it's brand new. The first closing is at $100 million, US dollars. And there we plan to have a second closing at $300 million before the end of 2019. So this $100 million is provided by AFD, Agence Française de Développement, EIB, so the European Investment Bank, BNP Paribas, French bank, Mirova, another French bank, the Canadian government, the government of Luxembourg, and a last one, I can't remember, a foundation somewhere. So that's both public and private. And we are discussing with the European Commission, UK government, Italian government, and some additional private money coming from insurance and banking sector. So the whole thing is to share the risk. So that's why we have, so it's purple, we have the assets. The assets are the investment in concrete projects. So the project is the asset. So let's take what is already in the pipe, and you can translate that into the GSR project. Project for organic agriculture, for fair trade agriculture, for sustainable palm oil on restored land, for coffee, for cocoa, for nuts, and so on and so on. So the idea is to say, okay, and for one also very interesting in Brazil on beef. You know the story in Brazil, massive story, deforestation of Amazonia because of beef and soy. Because the logic when you are a farmer in Brazil is to cut trees, then you have a new place for your cattle. It's a very large one, and then when it becomes less productive because of the usage, then you cut more trees, and then you move the cattle. And so you have destroyed the land, destroyed the forest, and then you still destroy the land and still destroy the forest. And then that's exactly why Amazonia is shrinking now. So the whole thing is to say, okay, let's have a contract with this cooperative or this farm, saying, okay, you stop deforestation, and you start intensifying your cattle operation on the ground which is in the process of being degraded, and then we restore this land, so you don't have to extend and you don't have to deforest. And you have more revenues because you have more intensification. But today, the model is not working this way in Brazil, and that's why we invest in that new model in order to limit deforestation and provide additional revenue for farmers and cooperatives. So the assets are mainly in the commodity sector. So here you can apply that for sure to the agricultural side of the project. Why not on the mangrove side? Depends on the activities connected to that. And why not on the fishery side as well? Then you start trenching the risk. Some of the players, AFD, Agence Française de Développement, is ready to lose the money. Some others, BNP Paribas, is not ready to lose the money. So if ever something goes wrong, the first losses will be for AFD. And then if 2 years later the project is back again on the break-even, then the positive side will be for BNP Paribas first. And then if it's positive again for AFD. So there you have this sharing of risk depending on is it private money or is it public money. So this $100 million is shared on tranches between junior investors, which are the most risky ones, and senior investors. And then, of course, we need, with this fund, a facility. This facility is funded by Jeff in order to, I would say, to feed the fund itself. As I take the example here of the GSR, so there is already a proposal, there will be a proposal, short term, with a specific side on the organic farming. Okay, you could use this facility to I don't know, to design additional projects, to work on the ground with the community of actors, to demonstrate that there is a business case. And then once you are able to do so, then you put the project into the investment committee of the fund, and you can have, for the time being, it's around 10 to 20 millions. So it's part of the financing, that's what Paul said. And then it's either an equity, so is it capital, or is it a debt, or a loan, or over 5, 6, 7 years. The average investment will be around between 5 and 8 years. Because you need to grow, or you need to restore, and then you get the money back. So, to start with, it's at 100 millions level. Then we will move to 300 millions quite swiftly, because there are many institutions already interested in joining, JEF, GCF, European Commission, UK, and so on. And the whole idea, and that's the beauty of it, is once we have enough equity, then we can move to bonds. Bonds, it's a debt instrument which cannot, and when you issue bonds, you have to pay the interest. You can't afford to lose the capital. And then, so you need to have a certain amount of money that you can lose. That's equity. So if you can get to the debt market, so the bond market is the biggest, largest market as a financial tool. And then if you can tap this market, then it's very easy to move from hundreds, millions to billions. But why it's easy? Because there are a lot of money there from pension funds, to take one example, but they will never ever invest if there is no certain amount of equity ready to be lost. So it takes time to build this equity level, but once it is done, then the leverage effect is huge. Already today, with this mechanism of senior and junior, if one institution, your government, for instance, or another body for development, the development community, invest an additional 1 million, or let's say 10 million in that fund, it has an automatic leverage of 5. It generates 50 million additional, so that if you put 10, because if you put 10 in the junior, so it's the most risky one, then you can generate 50 of the senior investors. It's a contract we have with EIB. So that's why the whole beauty is to pool resources up to reach the level where you can tap the debt market. And then you move from hundreds of millions to billions. That's exactly what we need to finance conservation at scale. But there is a prerequisite, and this prerequisite is that there is a business case. And in some cases, there will be no business case. Because the revenue, I don't know what about the GSR, I don't know which part of the revenue you estimated is direct financial revenue or indirect revenue needed for the community but will not go to the pocket of the organic farmer. So it depends on there are two categories there. Here we are only talking about the revenue that will go to the pocket of the organic farmer that could pay back the farm. But even there, there is a huge part which is underfinanced. So I'm not saying that that kind of tool will solve all the problems we have, for sure, but with the leverage effect, it can scale up and be at scale for all the projects that have a business case. And when you talk about ecotourism, organic farming, fair trade, sustainable palm oil, sustainable soy, sustainable beef, sustainable cotton, and so on and so on and so on, you can see that there are obvious cases where there are business models, but that are not developed at scale. Because actually, nobody cares about the restoration of natural capital. It's a sort of empty box, and we need to fill this box to demonstrate the fact that when you restore capital, as somebody said at the beginning of this session, the tourists here, they don't come to, they come to see coral reefs, and they don't want to see dead coral reefs, otherwise they will not come. So there is obviously an interconnection, a strong interlink between natural capital and economic capital, but we have to make it live in terms of very concrete revenues and projects. So that's the purpose of this fund. And of course, there is a 40 pages presentation that is available. So if ever you want to join this community, either you connect with Hubert from the New Caledonia office or through Paul from the Finance Lab in Vienna, so that we can we can have you on board and to feed the pipe. Everything is ready now, so if you go on board, then you will have the analysis of one specific piece of the project. Let's start maybe with the organic one, organic farming one, and then in a couple of months, if it's bankable, as if I go back to the last slide of Paul, the whole right-hand part in, I think it was in red or purple or blue, something like that, bankable projects, and organic farming is a bankable project, so that you can then access to this fund. The second topic I was asked to mention very briefly is before moving to the last one. The second is the green bond. So I already mentioned that in the context of LDN, but for LDN is still a perspective. It's not done yet, but for states, it's already done. As you know, Fiji has a green bond and France has a green bond. And together, WWF-France, together with the Treasury, so the French Treasury, designed the first sovereign green bond. And it was very interesting because we managed to overcome all the cultural and technical barriers and obstacles. And now in France, we have a green bond after, I think it was 3 issuance. We have a 14 billion green bonds, so 14 billion euros invested in green activities, whether it is organic farming, renewable energies, and so on and so on. And nothing about nuclear. That's outside of the basket. So that's interesting because it's probably the first time that an NGO and a treasury designed a bond at that level of of 14 billion. And of course, that's just the beginning of the story, because they started at 9, and then 12, and now 14, and then before well, next year it will be 17, and then 20, and so on and so on. So maybe I could conclude in a minute. To move to the political sequence we consider as a momentum to get a global deal for nature. You all know the story about Paris Agreement, not sufficient. Fiji had the presidency of the last COP. We know all the problems we face, but I can't see how we could be better off without Paris Agreement. I mean, Paris Agreement on climate is not enough, but if we were in a world without the Paris Agreement, I can't see how we could be better off. So we need an equivalent of the Paris Agreement on nature. And it will be in 2020, in Beijing for the COP, for the CBD COP, and what we, as the CBD, we could discuss that CBD is not as powerful as the Climate Convention. So everybody in the conservation community considers that we need several landing zones to have a deal in Paris, in 2020, including the IUCN Congress. We discussed that with your regional representative of IUCN, which will take place in France in June 2020. So this graph, to start with, is a very interesting one, and it comes from the World Economic Forum. And 8 out of the 10 most likely and impactful risks perceived by the business community are related to the environment, which is key, huge, and new. So my level of understanding of when I discuss with CEOs of multinationals, and we have a lot of partners at WWF, I can tell you that they have for sure climate change on their radar screen, but not only climate change, water scarcity and so on and so on. So 8 out of the 10 big risks ahead for this community are environment related. It's a cultural shift. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, is green, by far, we all know that, but the perception of the risk is there. And up to 2020, come on, yeah. No. Okay. Up to 2020, there will be a lot of events that will pave the way to the 2020 momentum. So one of them will be the G7 in France in August. But in 2020, there will be at least 3 key landing zones to find this global deal for nature. So the WWF in Davos, and WWF is working with the WWF to gather the business community to take robust commitments on nature. IUCN Congress in June in Marseille, and the COP in China. So you are well placed here. So not that far from China, a bit far from France, but depending on how you consider New Caledonia. You're well first to showcase what you have been doing, of course, but also to concur to the global deal, to attract additional commitments coming from the various sectors and players. And that's how the last slide. Yeah, the last slide is how the global deal could look like according to WWF. The momentum consists in shifting 5 key players. The same players that made the Paris deal on climate. States, of course, cities and national authorities like California and so on, business, private finance, development banks. And it will land in several fora you have the main three at that stage, but one of them could in 2020 become maybe more important than expected, so we have to remain flexible, of course. And then pressure will come from the external public, communities, NGO, business champions, leaders, political pressure, and science. And we have already several commitments from the French President, Emmanuel Macron, to say that France would intend to have a diplomatic leadership on this issue from now on up to 2020, together with China, to strike this deal as we managed to get it on climate. So you can connect your local stories with this global deal, because as biodiversity is so rich in this region, whether we talk about coral reef or whether we talk about forest and so on, that it's very easy for you to demonstrate that protecting nature here pays off at the global level. So if I were you, I would use this momentum to sell your stories, to attract additional commitments and additional finance commitments, not only finance commitment, but also finance commitment, putting the pressure on the tourist industries to say, okay, there is a global deal there. You're going to be asked by governments or by civil society organizations or by your investors or by your clients. What do you do to protect, let's say, coral reef? So you can connect very concrete projects like GSR, and the financing side of it with the diplomatic and the political side of the global story. So that's why I wanted also to mention that, because for me it's a way to accelerate, to speed up, and to scale up what you're doing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Paul, it's good to see you're still there. Thank you, and apologies for the slight delays here. What we're going to do is take a few questions from the group. Could I ask, we're not sure if this is going to work from over there, but if you could speak really clearly into the mic and loudly so that Paul can hear. And please direct your question to Paul or to Pascal as you wish.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation, sir. My name is Iso Kobubuan from the Institute of Applied Science Chemistry. It's not a question, just a comment. I think this initiative, if it's taken to the community level, it actually will assist a lot in incentive for some of these communities to really engage seriously in conservation activities. Particularly when you mention about initiatives like projects like mangrove planting or organic can be seen as like an asset from the community perspective, something that wasn't there before. And I'm seeing something very innovative here, and if it's done properly with the relevant policies in place, I think it can be something, could be a big boost for conservation here in Fiji, particularly where resources are owned by indigenous communities, both marine and land. So I see that there's a lot of value, and that's my take from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that, for the presentation, and just in terms of getting us to think about the funding mechanisms. I had, my apologies because my question might come out jumbled and we can talk a bit more at the break. But I wanted to just understand what are some of the risks that we have to think about, taking into account that PCAFI, that's the regional insurance mechanism, and also just the experience that I think was Tonga that had with regards to the regional disaster fund, and then the disaster wasn't big enough for them to draw from that fund. So in terms of getting communities and government buy-in, what is it that INGOs need to prepare, right? Or, what are some of the risks? How do we know that we have to work alongside communities, but as INGOs, what else can we do at that global level apart from this mechanism of talking to, to the other players that you've outlined? What do we need to do at the Leaders Forum, for instance, the Pacific leaders? So I'm just really keen to hear about other examples that WWF might have in other regions.
I would say that the very first thing to be done is to generate a cultural change. Then decision makers stop considering nature as something empty to be exploited, but something that creates value in itself. Value, moral value, that's another story, but also economic value in itself. And you know probably the story and the figure about what the economist called Costanza figured out. If the humanity had to pay for the natural services or the ecosystem services that are free today, so whether we talk about coming from forests or from the oceans or from fresh water and so on, it would cost us, or for well, anyway, forget it, I can't remember the English one. It will cost us, so if we have to pay for all of that, 1.5 the global GDP. So you could say, well, okay, we are destroying forests, but it will be replaced by some technologies that will grab the CO2 from the atmosphere. Okay, we can destroy bees, but the crops will be what's English for pollinized? Is it English? Pollinized? Yeah, pollinized. Okay. By humans, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay, why not? But it will cost us 1.5 times the global GDP. So that's for sure something we can't afford. So designing the issue of nature conservation, not only as nature conservation, but welfare conservation and prosperity conservation, helps to change the mindset of decision makers that by themselves, unfortunately, do not care that much about nature. Second, of course, is pressuring. And you might know the analysis made by, I think it was a European Science Center about how much the climate story went up in the media, and how low the nature loss story is covered by the media. It's less than 10 times, 20 times, unfortunately, for nature compared to climate. So I'm not trying to create a sort of competition between climate issues and nature, because of course they are all interrelated. But it happens that when you go outside, I take the European context, I'm pretty sure it's the same here, but could be challenged, that if you go in the street and you talk about climate change, I mean, everybody has heard about climate change. Whether it is adaptation, disaster, 2 degrees, and so on, so that something is in their mind. You go outside and you say, well, by the way, 60% of nature has already disappeared in the last 4 decades. I mean, that's an amazing figure we release every 2 years at the WWF in a report called Living Planet Report. So 60% of the non-domestic nature has disappeared in the last 4 decades. It's something that nobody really knows. So there is a clear difference of ownership and knowledge between the two issues. So that's another example. So delivering stories, figures, and I count very much on science here because, well, get back to 10 years ago, the IPCC, the climate scientists, started ready to communicate about the impact of climate change. And it contributed to shift and to change the whole global story about it. The first global assessment of the health of nature will be released in May next year by the equivalent of IPCC, so IPBS for conservation, for nature, for biodiversity. It will be made from Paris, and we have started to work with the scientists to make sure that it's not a 500 pages boring scientist report that you can't communicate on, but something that we could make a sort of global stories like the IPCC when we started with the last 1.5 reports. I mean, in each and every country on this planet, you have this media coverage of this report. The idea is to have exactly the same kind of coverage for the nature report in May next year. So start also messaging your own government, bodies, institutions to say, well, something big will happen in May next year, the equivalent of the 1.5 report.
Particularly for the presentation on the various or diversified ways of funding. I was a bit concerned that the entire focus was essentially on the GCF, mainly because at the moment the GCF is not really actually active in providing funding and having a lot of difficulties as it is. And I think to see the diversification with the private sector, with loans, with investment, with insurance is very important. And I think we should constantly look at diversification of funding instead of 3 to 5 year cycles projects in particular. But I'd like to also mention, and thank you Pascal for your presentation, this is a fascinating concept. But let's get back to COP21, and I think many of us here were there. And what really turned the tide at COP21, 2 days prior to the final agreement, was really the High Ambition Coalition that was formed a year before and led by the Marshall Islands, by the Pacific Islands. And I think without the High Ambition Coalition putting pressure onto the main emitter countries, I think it would not have happened. So here's a plea from the Pacific Islands to actually get our leaders and chief negotiators to set up a high ambition coalition for nature, just like it was done for 2020. I was told the high coalition was set up through New York by different chief negotiators and ministries 1 year before the Paris Agreement. But it actually really started to work only 3 days before the final Paris Agreement. And you were there, I was there, and many other people were at COP21 that are in this room. And we will all recall the plea by late Minister Tony de Bruyn of the Marshall Islands to actually lead and chair that coalition. And I think the Pacific Islands, in this case, because of our ocean and because of the nature of the islands, you know, the program of work on island biodiversity was the last one to be approved under the CBD at COP8, I think, in Curitiba. And so island biodiversity was not really considered before that. And I think this is our chance for the Pacific Islands to actually get and start up a high-level ambition coalition that would actually lead towards a global deal for nature and people in 2020. My suggestion.
All right. If I can take that one back home, because the fact is that so the French diplomacy is working hard at the Macron level as well to start designing something that will put that high on the agenda. And I mentioned the fact that the G7 will be hosted by France, or G7, well, G7, G6, G nothing, because actually the last two meetings were very not conclusive. So the idea is precisely to redesign it and to gather coalitions of champions on specific issues, mainly on environment, climate, and nature. So what I'm going to share back to Paris, that why not using the renewed format of G7 to create this coalition of champions of high ambition for nature in 2020, something like that. Of course, associating islands in the Pacific, that could make a lot of sense, I think, because it would be precisely 1 year and something before the Chinese COP. And it would be also in the context of the story you mentioned around the coalition of climate related to Paris Agreement. So that's my flag. Thank you for the.
Before coming to Fiji as the ambassador of France, I was in Houston, Texas, which is considered as the oil capital of the world. And even in the oil capital of the world, it was not so difficult, actually, to convince investors to invest in renewable energy. And in a place like Texas, people didn't do it because it was good for the planet. They did it because it was good for their wallet. It was profitable. And I think the case has to be made stronger, that investing in nature and conservation is also profitable. So my question to Paul, or maybe Pascal Canfin, is can we make the case that these funds, which are private equity investments, actually, can compete with other types of investments in terms of rate of returns?
Well, compete to 2 digits returns for half a day? No, never. That's the whole point about regulating financial systems, but that's another story. But competing with medium-term investments with 5%, 7% return, yes, for sure. Otherwise, BNP Paribas would have never joined this fund. Natixis would have, another French bank would have never joined this fund, and so on and so on. So I think it's more and more the case. Why? Because it's when you start restoring natural capital, it provides economic benefits. So I think we have already dozens of examples. But we need, as a conservation community, also to make sure that we clearly disconnect, make explicit 2 kinds of return. The return for the wallet of the producers and the investors, and the return for the community. Because you can have huge return for the community that are not channeled to the wallet of the investor and the producers, which is good from a macro perspective, but which doesn't change anything from a micro perspective of one specific organic farmer, one specific fisherman, one specific tourist, ecotourism company, whatever. So we need to, every time we need to balance and to tell the 2 stories. The macro one, good for the common good, for the governments, for the development agencies, and so on and so on. So to targets that could pay for this common good, but also addressing the concern of private actors that are not against common goods, but just saying, well, it's not my job. And being able to do both. So that's kind of example with the DNF or the projects that you are running here. Always make sure to make the difference between the 2. And to provide a business case, a micro business case for one specific cooperative, one specific investor, one specific fisherman, one specific tuna fish company, and so on and so on and so on. And I can tell you that it's already happening, not at scale, and that's the whole point again. And just to make sure that you have the whole story of the purpose of the end, because I think it can be transformational. If we manage to have a bit more than 300 equity, in terms of equity, we can tap into the bond markets, and then we can get 2 billion. That's the objective. And you don't have any tools today dedicated to land restoration at the level of $2 billion US. So if we manage to get that, we would have changed the picture of I would say conservation finance. And that's the purpose and the objective of this.